What's up, guys? Welcome back to the WRPF podcast. I'm your host, Alex Uslar. This week, we have the man behind Pioneer Fit. You guys know the brand. You guys love the brand. It's the belts that we see on the platform 99% of the time, unless it's IPF, right? We got Mr. Matt Hayden. All right. I know a little bit about Matt from over the years. You guys may know him if you follow the Pioneer page. You see him always doing Q&As, but essentially he is the man behind Pioneer, which is a sub company of his family's company that's been around a very long time. That's something that you guys may not know the history. And that's why I wanted to have Matt on. Besides him being someone who gives back to the sport more than anyone I know, and that term's thrown around a lot, giving back to the sport, doing things for the sport. But I will say, knowing Matt as long as I have, him supporting me, my events, just seeing everything he's done as a fellow business owner, Matt, thank you. I tell you thank you all the time, but I'm saying it for the 100th time. And I know it's like beating a dead horse, but you have done so much for powerlifting, and we are all very appreciative.
Uh, First and foremost, thanks for having me on here. I appreciate that. I appreciate all of the kind words. I'm just going to spit it right back out. The powerlifting community has supported us. It's a reciprocation of support that is important. So, as much as we've given back, it's because you guys have given us the support. So,
Hell yeah, man. So I want to kind of take it back. A lot of the interviews we do on here are with different high level competitive powerlifters, and we kind of talk about their competition history. But I want to do that same kind of format, but more or less with your business history, your background, what you went to school for, if you went to school for whatever you went to school for, how you got involved in this line of work that you're currently in. I believe it was your family business. So let's run it back. Let's kind of start with that history.
so the family business started in 1979. We were incorporated in like 82. I was born in 87, so obviously this was before my time. So I'm getting secondhand knowledge from my parents. My grandfather started it in Sydney, Nebraska in 1979. My parents bought it from them, bought it from my grandparents in the 80s, early to mid 80s. Obviously, I was born in 87. I took it over after going. I went to college for a couple of years. I wanted out of Coleman as fast as I could when I turned 18. A lot of high school graduates are probably in those same shoes. And I swore I'd never come back. Well, fast forward about 7 years, I came back. So this would have been in 20. Oh, I've been here for 10 years. So 2013. I came back to the family business begrudgingly. Like I said, I didn't want to. I didn't have a powerlifting background. My family's been running this business in the weightlifting, powerlifting realm for 30 years. I saw it as busy work. My parents used to make me come out there and punch washers and trim little stitches off of wrist wraps and things of that nature. So I didn't like the business when I was growing up as a teenager or a young child. My parents would make me go out there, and it was kind of my babysitter. Uh, but I grew up playing golf, being an athlete. I really was basketball was my first love. I went to college on a golf scholarship. I made golf my life, my career for about 7 years outside of high school before making the transition back to Pioneer. And how that kind of came about was my parents gave both my older sisters a chance to take it over. They were ready to, kind of hit the exit. They'd been doing it for 35 years or so. My Neither one of my sisters wanted to take it. And at the time, I was working as a golf professional at a private country club in Fort Worth, and I felt stuck. My wife was going through college. She was obviously my fiance at the time, but she was going through college. She was about to try and find a master's program elsewhere. So she got into a master's program in Abilene, which is the biggest town close to us. It's about 60 miles north of here. And she got in there. I was kind of looking at jobs in the Abilene area, which is kind of close back to home. And it worked out super well because my parents gave me that call kind of right in the middle of us looking for jobs and places to live in Abilene, asking if we wanted to come back and take over the family business. So it was a pretty easy yes. Like I said, I felt stuck in the job I was at. I thought, running a business, nobody could tell me what I was worth. I could put in as much effort or as little effort as I wanted. Um, there was no ceiling. So the attraction to come back and operate the family business that had afforded my sisters and I a childhood that I couldn't, we didn't want for anything. They've done really well, my parents, over the years. So, anyways, I said yes. We moved in. I think it was April of 13. I started, and my first order of business was to go retail. Was to try and get into, because consumers, actual end customers' eyeballs. At the time when I moved in, we were a third party manufacturer, 100%. So we made weightlifting belts and accessories for lots of companies, but nobody knew that we were making them. Obviously, we've got longtime customers. Elite FTS comes to mind, which I'm sure some of the listeners are going to know Dave Tate and the guys at Elite FTS. They were one of our first big customers when I first got here. And, we kind of, their P2 belts, they did a really good job marketing those. They had a really good following. I don't want to say they were getting famous because Dave was, he was awesome well before I ever came around. But I kind of started to see that there were companies out there kind of getting famous off of the belts that we were making. So it was an easy transition for me to think, hey, we need to get in the public eye. So that's when we started our social media accounts. Instagram was fairly small still at that time. I think Instagram probably started in 2010, 2011, something like that. So this was 2013, fairly new. And I just started shooting DMs off, trying to find people that would, help spread the word. We would make, free belts. We had some customizations, some capabilities at that time. And we exercised the capabilities that we had quite a bit. And we actually grew capability wise to what we see today, which is pretty wild. Just even the post that I pictured today, that I posted today, was a green alligator with an elephant inlay. Those weren't options when I first started, right? I mean, it was you could put your last name on there, and that was about it. Embroidery was about as crazy as it got. Now it's morphed into much different. You guys see that stuff all the time, I'm sure, on the platforms. We see it on social media quite a bit. But the segue from us just putting stamps on belts for other companies to us being able to kind of make dreams come true when it comes to custom belts, it's been a pretty cool ride for the last 10 years or so.
So before we get into kind of the last 10 years, because it's funny, because I thought Pioneer had been around a little bit longer than that, because I think our first interactions, and I first saw you guys in 2013. That's around when I created my social media. And the first time I messaged you was sometime in 2014 about an event that I was going to run and getting some belts given away. But before that, just to give the listeners a little synopsis and some information on what Matt was talking about from a business perspective. It was you. Did you start the name Pioneer?
No, so Pioneer Sports, I believe, was the original brand name of General Leathercraft. So General Leathercraft's our parent company.
Right.
Pioneer Sports, Pioneer. There was a Pioneer Outdoors at some point, which we've kind of tried to revamp. But my grandfather sold the Pioneer line as their brand, but the parent company's name was General Leathercraft from the beginning. And that's kind of, and it's always kind of been that way. We sold Pioneer belts through General Leathercraft. Like we talked about before we got started recording, you've got General Motors making GMC, making Chevrolet. We're the Pioneer is the Chevrolet to GM's General Leathercraft. It's confusing, but that's kind of how I make the connection. We sell the Pioneer line, but our company's name is General Leathercraft.
Makes sense. So what he's also saying, guys, is they were the people behind the scenes, as many companies are for different things. Like, for example, I have my line, Go Strong Gear, but I also have a clothing manufacturing where I do all the screen printing and I do it for other brands, help other brands. And what that works is that's the manufacturing side of things. Then you sell to the other brand, the brand sells it and markets it. So like what Matt was saying is that's what his family business was historically for years and years and years. It was a successful model and a model that still exists today and something that they still do. But he was like, well, we have all these capabilities. Why don't we go directly to the consumer? And that's a whole nother business line. And it's very cool to me to hear you really didn't have any business background besides seeing what your parents had done your entire life. And right away, right off the bat, as soon as you jump in, you're like, let me start innovating and adding all these different ideas.
So I don't know if it's a generational thing. In my brain, it was super easy to see, right? If we have to wholesale belts, which are wholesale accounts, you have to sell them at a much lower price. Usually it's higher quantities, bulk quantities, sell them at a lower rate so that they have enough room to sell them at retail. So it was, more work, less money. Flip side, you go retail, you've got less work and more money. So it was an easy deal there, and that helps us be able to kind of drive costs down to the end consumer. So if we were selling these custom belts to a retail brand, we would have to sell them. Obviously, for us, we'd have to sell them a little bit cheaper, but then they would put their, a lot of times, 100% markup on. So that these custom belts through a different brand would be 40-50% higher than they are from us. So obviously it works well for us. It works a little bit well with the consumer doesn't really know that because there is not that that middle brand. But we do still do a bunch of third-party manufacturing. There's some that I can say, some that I can't say just from confidentiality agreements, but there are lots of companies out there that use Pioneer belts. I know that there's going to be people that know that, like, oh, there's a PAL belt from this company. Well, if it's a PAL belt and it's branded a Pioneer Cut or a PAL, it's coming from us. It's just branded and, sold as a different company.
Well, just I'll go ahead and put my input because this is actually in the Q&A that I posted up. Someone asked, are there any collabs between Ghost and Pioneer in the works? Well, fun fact, me and Matt work together. Matt and Pioneer are our manufacturer, is Ghost's manufacturer for all of our wrist wraps and our knee wraps. Again, besides just belts, that's another product line that they manufacture and they create. And is that something that you guys have been creating like historically? That's not a newer product, right?
We've been doing wrist supports and knee supports for a long, long time now. That's morphed quite a bit from just like the old Ace Bandage days. But yeah, well before I was there. So it's probably been 20, 25 years that we've been making those for other people.
So obviously Ghost was founded by Tim. When Tim decided he wanted to do wrist wraps and other items, and I continued to evolve that line later on, Tim contacted Matt because he knew Matt created the best products, right? And they're made here in the U.S. He took a lot of pride since Ghost equipment was made in the U.S. He wanted to keep the wrist wraps made in the U.S. And so there's a fun fact for you guys. If you guys use our wraps, they are manufactured by Matt and Pioneer. Now, we created our own different levels or stretches and elasticities to our wraps that are different, obviously, than Pioneer specific different levels of wraps. And Pioneer does that for other companies as well. So if there's other companies out there that are listening that are interested in exploring product lines and not going overseas, you can get them here made in the U.S. And I can say firsthand, as I've done a lot of product development also overseas, just as Matt has. We've had conversations about this with knee sleeves and creating knee sleeves, how difficult it is to try to do here in the U.S. But you have so many headaches when you go overseas, right? Because this person's on a completely different time zone. They could take your money. They can run. They can give you samples of a product, and then you get the actual bulk of the product, and it's something completely different than what you ordered. I've struggled with that multiple times when going overseas. And that's why, it made it a clear-cut decision for Tim and then me when I bought over and took over Ghost to continue with Pioneer, because the products that you're getting, whether you buy directly from Pioneer, you buy someone like from myself, Elite FTS, or these other companies that use Pioneer. So that's an answer to that question. That's also just to kind of speak on what Matt was saying, where although they still have their line and you can buy directly from them, they're still working with other brands behind the scenes.
Right. I mean, there are quite a few, some that I can say, some that I can't, like I already talked about, but doing business in the United States is much simpler, right? You've got a customer service aspect where, if you have to exchange something, you're not having to wait, weeks sometimes, or you have to throw it onto the next order or whatever the case is. Like, you've got customer service or quality issues, whatever the case may be, that can be handled much more succinctly, going with an American manufacturer in this space. Man, and you're right. Going overseas is rough. It is unfortunate that there are not very many American manufacturers, belts, wraps, accessories, that kind of thing. There's just not that many of them. There's enough to service the market for the most part, but the vast majority of belts that you see on people's backs are still made in Pakistan or China. And it's kind of unfortunate. Now, in the powerlifting world, I think you've got your SBDs, which are overseas, which I think, there's a stigma that, Pakistan and China are cheap, right? You got an SBD that's made in the UK, and I don't think anybody thinks that those belts are cheap. But you've got them, you've got Inzer, you've got Titan, you've got us, and that's about it, right? There's everybody else. Well, I think there's some smaller ones. I can't think of any of them off the top of my head, but there are some smaller, 2 or 3 or 4 different people, that, are single people that make, custom belts. But outside of that, man, the Harbingers, the Valeos, the Gold's Gyms, all of the ones that are general training, CrossFit, whatever the case is, it's all made in China or Pakistan. And it's unfortunate that there's not a way, for us as Americans to bring manufacturing back, but the almighty dollar, goes where it goes the furthest. And it's just cheaper to use them.
I'm curious if historically, before you even took over the business, when your family had it, if you know the history of throughout those years of the 80s and 90s, direct competition or competing manufacturers, were they primarily in the US, or was there still kind of that struggle of your clientele deciding whether to go through you or go overseas? I can imagine going overseas was a little bit more of a complex process, 10, 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Dad really ever dealt with overseas up until maybe the last 15 years. I know that, man, I'm kind of racking my brain. We didn't deal with anybody overseas. We didn't have any overseas customers. If we dealt with anybody overseas, it was through another American company, so if it, some of our leather will come from Mexico. So you've got guys that work on the border, which we were in El Paso for a long time. So that you gain connections with people at Lucchese or Justin Boots or Ariat or some of those big companies, and they're bringing leather in from Mexico, and you have those connections, and I think that's kind of how that worked back then. But if you weren't anywhere close and you didn't have those connections, emails, I guess, were still maybe a thing. I don't know when emails came around, but I know we had them in 2000. It would have been much harder to try and do business overseas or even out of the country at all that long ago.
I feel like a lot of the companies, they were having to travel over there, find the manufacturers directly overseas or whatever it may be. So for certain products, it just made sense to stay in the US. So over in those last years, you've obviously seen that shift of the companies wanting to either go overseas, the direct competitors, but the quality obviously speaks for itself, which is why you're able to still captivate those consumers.
Yeah, and I remember Dad talking about it, and this would have been in the 80s when the influx of the Pakistani belt came in, the Vallejo, Harbinger, those type belts that kind of came in and really flooded the fitness market. I know it was hard for Mom and Dad at that point. This would have been when I was, a baby. But I remember them talking about that. And I know that they've had the stock market crash of the 80s, the early 2000s when the Trade Center was hit. And then, obviously 08. So they went through 3 serious downturns in the market and really rough times in, financially in our country, and they've been able to survive it. So, overseas stuff, do they hurt? Yeah, I think they hurt a little bit, but as far as American manufacturers, most, like I said, even Inzer and Titan been around a long time, us been around a long time. So there's still enough support with you guys as a customer base to, keep us all around. So
100%. But I think the timing couldn't have been much better with the shift when you came about in 2013, to kind of pivot, continue that, manufacturing side of things, but add that direct to consumer side of things. If you were to weigh both ends of the business, which one do you say captivates more of your time and is the more, I guess you'd say, successful or active at the time?
At retail, up until we started on social media, and we didn't even have a website that you could order belts from when I first started. So obviously that changed. Retail or wholesale when I first came was 100% of our business. Now retail is probably 75% of our business. So yeah, in all facets, retail has been our best growing, definitely our most time consuming, and our most successful.
And again, the timing couldn't have been better because retail in 2013 to present day is essentially e-commerce, right? It's direct to consumer. You can market in different ways as opposed to if it would have been 20 years ago, your retail is you taking your belts and going to whatever sporting store or whatever that may be and be like, hey, you want to carry these and have these in stock, and it's obviously it was a much more would have been much more successful or much more difficult to get success from.
Yeah, I remember as a kid going to trade shows with dad all the time, where I'd sit in the booth while he was trying to sell leather headgear and tricep straps and nylon belts to all of these different companies that would be at these big major trade shows. We think of trade shows as like the Arnold. It's a big sports expo type deal. Well, they have trade specific shows just like that for everybody that's in the fitness world or services the fitness industry, and that's where we would go. As Pioneer. It would be dad, sometimes an uncle, sometimes my mother, mostly just him and I. Like he would just drag me along. I hated it. That may be the reason why I don't go to him very often now. It's just a whole lot of talking, a lot of back and forth, a lot of people coming in and out. There's just a lot of moving parts. But yeah, that's what they had to do that's what dad had to do to try to sell product rather than post an Instagram story.
Exactly. So then we get to 2013. You have the idea of this social media thing. You start this new venture, adding it online, contacting all these people. How quickly did you see that snowball of growth? Because I feel like the first time I saw the Pioneer Instagram somewhere around 2013 or whatever it was, even though there wasn't like viral things because how social media worked at that time, I saw so many people posting it, and I think that's because you got it in the hands of so many names.
At the time, there wasn't anybody else that was making custom belts. Cardillo for the bodybuilding world, I think, was doing custom belts, but in the powerlifting space, there was nobody. And at that time, like I said, Instagram was new, so I had Kevin Oak, Larry Williams before he really really blew up when he was still with Animal, all of the Animal guys, Rob Philippus and Rob Hall. There was, Eric Schwartz was the rep at Universal that kind of put on the animal cage when it first happened. Like we were able to get in with some of those as famous as they could be powerlifters at that time. And the powerlifting market embraced us and just carried us through. So as far as I was hoping that we could do 10 orders a day on the website. I felt like if we did 10 orders a day on the website, it would have been a really good shot in the arm for the business. It wasn't within 2 years, we were doing 100 to 150 orders on the website a day. So it was super fast. And during those growth years, the first 2 or 3 years that I was here, I spent the night at the shop running the embroidery machines. I mean, it was no thing for me to work 20 hours a day for those first 3 or 4 years. Hell, the first 6 and actually the first 8 weeks or so of working there, I worked there for free. I stayed the night and I slept on a beanbag in my office. So success was there. There was a lot of hours that had to do with that success. A lot of time on my phone, but also a lot of time working with my hands and getting belts out. So for the first 3 years that I was here, pretty much every custom belt was handmade by me. Now it's, I don't hand make them all, but they're all my processes essentially.
Dude, that's crazy. I had no idea that. And I feel like I remember seeing some things on social media of you posting of you making them and stuff, but I can only imagine you take on this new venture, you have certain staffing capabilities, but you still have these, these projects that you need to complete for customers. So you add this whole other department to your company, and now you don't have other hands to help. So boom, you have to take it on yourself, and you did it. And I know personally, as a business owner and seeing something grow, it feels so fulfilling, even though it's draining, it's exhausting. But just to see this kind of grow and blossom and at that rate, it's for sure so fulfilling. But man, mad respect for you continuing and taking that on yourself all those years. That's
It
crazy.
was, it was cool. Looking back on it now, I wouldn't trade it for the world, right? I mean, all of my crew thought I was crazy. My dad thought I was crazy. Him and I, butted heads because this is the direction I want to take it. Well, that's not what we've ever done before, so I don't want to take it that direction. So, it was me, not really in my spare time, but that was, I mean, I made sure all of our wholesale orders were taken care of because that was 100% of our business. And then 6 months, I'm doing all of our wholesale orders, and then I'm working at night trying to get all of our retail stuff done. So it was cool looking back on it, how I guess hard headed I was to kind of keep pushing in the retail side, and then it's just worked out. I'm not a business brainiac. I don't know anything. When I first started, I knew nothing. Lots of trial and error, lots of screw ups. Has led to where we're at today, which is just a huge blessing to our family.
Well, it's funny because I can totally see your dad's perspective from a business owner perspective. You have this kind of trajectory, you have this success in a company, which is a kind of a well-oiled machine that runs itself. You get an order from a customer, it's the same order that you've done, 50 times before. You got to make 100 of these exact same belts. The formula is the same.
Yeah.
The formula has been done before, and now it's just going to be rinse and repeat the same thing over and over. Now you have 100 orders that it's 100 different things, So from a logistics standpoint, it's logistically an absolute nightmare. Now your brain, you can't just run on just rinse, repeat the exact same thing 100 times. It's one, okay, that's finished. My brain now needs to process around the next project. Two, process around the next project, because they're all different. So your dad obviously looking at that, him being someone who's done this so long, like that's so much more work. But obviously as you create systems, it can become oiled itself. But you were the one crazy enough to say, I'm going to do this myself, prove it to them. And you were able to, where now it's 75% of your business. That's crazy, man. That's cool.
I appreciate that. Like I said, and the time when I was neck deep in it, I didn't think about that at all. It was just like, this is the order. This is what we have to do. And, that order was done. This is the next order. That's what you have to do. Looking back on it now, I've got people, all right, we're putting suede on. Inside's black, outside's red. That's what has to be done. And then they go to the next thing, and, they're supposed to have embroidery on it, or it's supposed to have, black stitching. Each person in each process, it's a little bit easier, I think, on everybody's brains. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of an assembly line type deal where, for mine, it's probably why I can barely even carry on a conversation anymore, because my brain is mush from really thinking about each and every one of those products. And I've still got two that were with me when I first started at the shop. They've been with me for a good while. They were there before I was there, and they remember the days, but all of my new employees, they don't remember. So they see me now, not really, rubbing elbows in the trenches with the guys anymore. And hopefully they understand that, I spent some time in the trenches out there too.
Oh, 100%. I hope they listen to this and know that, because it's like you have to work your way up in a company to be able to delegate those things. And if I feel like early on, if you had tried going in there, I mean, at the end of the day, you took over the company, you did own it now, and you tried telling these people that already worked there, here, now you're also going to do X, you're going to do Y, you're going to do Z, and it was so unfamiliar to them. It probably would have been so many more mess ups, so many more difficulties that maybe wouldn't have created the same success. But the fact that you were able to take it all on and create these systems and create this, tried and true thing that worked, then you were able to delegate it to the correct people. But now they see Papa Hayden hanging out in his huge home gym. But that's the hard work, man. The hard work, as everyone says, hard work pays off, and starting a business is not easy, and it takes a lot of risk, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a certain stubbornness and a certain mind that will commit and keep going at it. And then after the time, when things scale and when things level out, then you can kind of enjoy the fruits of your labor a bit more.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt. And there's I've got my kids and I've got my my work family, and all of them, respect levels. If you're out there in the trenches and they know that you've done the things that they've done, if they're a lot easier to manage. They understand that you have more knowledge, maybe not more knowledge, but as much knowledge as they do in their specific parts of the process. So it's really cool to step away and just look at all of the moving parts at Pioneer and realize that I'm usually a pretty humble guy, but I get to pat myself on the back every once in a while. It's usually in silence. Like, damn, Matt, you did a pretty good job here.
Well, I mean, alone, it speaks for itself where you are a very humble guy and you don't do that, but people are able to see how much you're doing for others, which obviously is a product of your company's success. Because if your company wasn't successful, you wouldn't have the funds or the capabilities to do what you're doing for the sport, right?
Right.
But also at the same time, there's tons of people who have put in that work, gotten that success, but aren't willing to do the same things that you're doing. So kind of take me through that. Your evolution of from day one, you were giving back to the sport of powerlifting. You were reaching out to these different athletes. You were giving them belts. You were sponsoring meets, giving free belts to different meets. And then it got to the point where, you started supporting high level powerlifting meets, and then even started your own high level powerlifting meet where all this income from your business, that could just be personally delegated to yourself or people in your company or whatever it is, you then instead decide, I want to support this sport and help grow this sport.
Yeah. So when I first started, I'm not going to sit here and lie to anybody. I think they would see right through it. When I was giving belts away and trying to get our name out there, it was self-serving, right? We were trying to grow the brand. If you fast forward 5 years, and this has been 5 years ago, we got to the point where it was a true, these guys have brought us further than we ever thought we could be. I want to show how much we appreciate it. So that's when we started the tribute. That's when we started, the Pioneer Open over the last few years. And just this year alone, these figures are not going to be exactly, but it's over $250,000 we've given back through various organizations, meets, and other sponsorship stuff. So it is a true appreciation that, when we give back, it has nothing to do. Most of the time when I give back, like the tribute, we didn't even want to put our name on the logo, like on the backdrops. We didn't care. It was not about that. It was about giving back to the people that, were growing the sport, the competitors that were growing the sport. Yes, it was an upper echelon meet. Yes, it was, a pro meet or whatever you would call it. But I felt at that time, and I still feel that, big money meets attract eyeballs, and eyeballs attract money, and money attracts more eyeballs, and it just kind of all revolves. So I think that those big money meets are a really good thing for the sport. Then this is a perfect way to the Pioneer Open, where we gave out $135,000 in April this year. I think it was in April. I don't know, somewhere right around there. But $135,000. There's probably companies that make more money than we do that's never given away that kind of money. So I do think
it's just
good.
2 months removed from you helping out at the Ghost Clash, contributing $25,000 to our $50,000 prize money. So it's been an endless thing. And honestly, people see it, but I don't think a lot of people, unless you're like a business owner and involved in that world, fully understand at what scale you're doing it. And because you just said, sure, supporting these high level meets do get more eyes on you, get more eyes on your product. And most sponsors, that is a lot of their reasoning or logic behind doing it, right? It's like, how is this going to market my brand? How is this going to help grow my brand? Although it's also supporting, the sport or, field that I'm involved with. People think about the ROI, right? Am I going to get a return, or am I going to get enough, customers back from it? But hell, man, I don't think there's any sponsors in the sport of powerlifting who can justify any type of ROI on spending $130,000 on the meet, you know? So that's purely selfless, purely selfless.
Again, and this all comes from, it's just reciprocation. That's all it is. You guys have spent bukus of money with us. So giving back is just, it's just I think the right thing to do.
And I think that's also what separates you. And again, not to just keep patting you in the back, but I want to, and I want all the listeners to, and to fully understand. That's what separates you from other companies and helps contribute to your success and continued success. Call it karma, call it whatever you will, you know, where you could still be doing these things on a smaller scale, but giving back to yourself. But the selflessness just speaks for itself. And again, thank you. And again, this next year, Ghost Clash, third year in a row that Matt's involved after being involved with meets that I was in before starting the Ghost Clash. And he's always there. He's always willing to help. And it's super cool to see. Getting into some kind of like next questions over the last years, have there been any points of kind of, you know, major struggles or changes or shifts and thoughts of continued growth? Or has it kind of just been cruising through things over the last 10 years?
I mean, like I said, I usually keep my head down and work. This last year has been trying, and I think everybody can kind of understand, you know, with some of the things that came to light in certain federations. You know, there was a lot of negativity circulating in the powerlifting world about that. The lifting was all still good, but there was a downtick, and you know, honestly, it kind of wore on me. And it really shouldn't, because it didn't really have anything to do with me. I just didn't like seeing my people hurting. You know what I mean? When I say my people, I mean like everybody in the powerlifting community. You could tell everybody was reeling about it, and with reason. So that one hurt a little bit. There was nothing I could do to fix it, to help. You know, I disassociated and kind of just stepped back a little bit after all of that stuff came to light, and you know, kind of just got left confused. You know, I use organizations as vehicles to give money back. That's essentially what in my process. You know, obviously we've got guys like you, you know, that are you know, we're closer than just you're a vehicle. Like we're friends. But for the most part, organizations for Pioneer, for me, is just a vehicle to give money from, you know, the support back to the athletes. So after all of that stuff this year, you know, it was, oh no, crap. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
Somebody called me. I thought I had it on silent or private, but anyways, after all of the information and stuff came out this year, I was left confused on what to do. Right. So I'm trying to find a place that I can support without getting bombarded or bashed for supporting. And I don't think I'm alone in that. There's going to be other business owners and other, you know, sponsors that are going to be in that same boat. Like, you know, who do I support? Like, do I support this guy? I don't really know this guy. Is he going to come out and be, you know, a pedophile or whatever the case is, right? So I mean, it was just confusing and kind of disheartening, just because we saw so much negativity in the powerlifting world. Was it good that it was brought to light? Yeah. I mean, in the short term, I think it hurt powerlifting. In the long term, I think it's going to help. So, outside of that, this year has been the roughest. Every year prior to this has been nothing but excitement, nothing but growth, nothing but just head down, ass up, and working hard and trying to do the best thing that we can do for the sport. This year was a little bit more difficult. At least the last 6 months or however long it's been since that came out. We actually had to run. Actually, I know it was somewhere around April where that powerlifting meet came out, because we ran it unsanctioned, which was really hard. You know, that was a really stressful situation, because we wanted to be where we'd always been, but I didn't want to associate because of everything that was going on. Like it was a tough, confusing time, and it's kind of worn on me ever since. And that's been a pretty good while now.
And it's difficult because you have your own businesses to run, you have your own family to worry about, your own workers to worry about. And this is something that, although it has nothing to do with you, because of what you've done to give back, it has everything to do with you. Right. And it was one of those things where it's like, you can't do right, you can't do wrong. And it was just adding I know as from a business owner perspective, unnecessary stress and concern and worry, instead of being worried about focusing on your business, your products, whatever it may be. It was definitely a weird thing, but also in my perspective, this last year, 2, 3, powerlifting is still growing at such a rapid rate. I don't know about you, but I've had this conversation with multiple people on the podcast. I started my powerlifting club and I started formally powerlifting myself in 2013, started my powerlifting club in 2014, started taking people to local meets around Florida. 2015, 2016, and then 2017 is when I started working for Hybrid, a big name, and start traveling to all these pro level meets, meeting all these big people. But in 2015, 2016, when I had my powerlifting club in the corner of a CrossFit gym, I looked at CrossFit as a whole and I'm like, I don't know, like, is there a lot of certainty to this? Like, is this thing going to be around forever? Is this kind of like a fad? This is like kind of my career where I've put myself into after getting sober at 19. I'm like, is this going to be like, a consistent career? And then I start my powerlifting club 2016, even then 2017, I start working for Hybrid. I'm like, man, like, is this going to be a kind of forever thing? Because at this point, CrossFit's already in the downward slope. And I really didn't know what I thought about the future of powerlifting and if it was going to kind of stagnate, go down, stay the same. But I personally never would have envisioned the growth over the last 3 or 4 years, that's been so massive as it was. What about you?
I agree. When I first started in 2013, it was very, very small niche. And I think that thing has grown quite a bit in 10 years for sure. I think I may be wrong, or I may, this may not be what you agree with, but I think women in powerlifting have really helped the numbers. Like, I feel like women powerlifting has really grown. Social media, I think, helps. You've got a lot of like true good people in powerlifting. Social media highlights that. Are there some negative, crappy, threads on certain posts? Yes, there are. Are there bad things that happen in powerlifting? Yes, there is. But for the most part, powerlifting, the people in powerlifting make it great. Social media helps highlight the greatness of powerlifting. And I think that just, the community is so strong. It's so helping. It's so giving. It has nothing to do, but with it has nothing else to do but that, because it ushers in the new generation of being open armed and welcome and just genuinely good, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And it's also been kind of the surge of the last 4 or 5 years in the massive growth of the tested side of powerlifting. Because even if you look back 10 years ago and like, the people you were sending belts to, the animal athletes and these freakish mutant people, compared to now, you have like this whole new generation of these young people, young kids, looking up to people who they can compare themselves to, and tons of prominent female figures. Back then, 10 years ago, who was a prominent female powerlifter?
Yeah.
Nobody, like Steffi was one of the first ones to kind of come around, and that wasn't until 2016, 2017. So it's really cool to see and to know, because it's me from a business owner perspective, from a gym owner perspective, for someone that it's my career. I don't really have that uncertainty anymore of, are things going to stay stable? It's like, I think the sport is in a good place. These different issues, things coming to light, it's kind of just with the times, so to speak. But I think it's going to continue on the up and up and continue growing. And, having people like you, helping, myself trying to put together these pro level meets, have people come from everywhere. And at the same time, in my gym, I run tons of USAPL meets, doing multiple federations. Because at the end of the day, like you said, it doesn't matter to the federations. You want to give somewhere for the lifters where they feel comfortable, where they want to be, where they can have the best experience possible.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you do it. You're one of the, I don't want to say one of the few, because you're one of the few that I work with that do it well. I mean, you have the right mindset, and it's honestly a breath of fresh air. Because there are a lot of folks, that'll reach out. Hey, will you sponsor my meet? I've never heard of them. I don't know who they are. Odds are like probably 8 out of 10. I say yes, just because I want to help. But there are very few that are, out there trying to actively grow the sport. Now, I'm not going to take anything away from those other meets. I just don't know them, so I can't speak to their character and how well they run. some of that stuff
And
I can.
it's a difficult thing also, because at the end of the day, running meets is also a business, right?
Yeah.
Just like Pioneer is also a business. You can definitely have a business that does both, right? Where you give back to the sport, but you also have personal financial gain from it as well. All right. Or else,
Sure.
why the hell are you going to waste your time? But I think too many people try to throw around the terminology, oh, I do it for the sport. I do it for the love of the sport, because they hear other people doing it. But at the end of the day, they're looking at it as a huge cash grab, and they're able to get all this money, put it in their pocket without anything else rotating around, you know? And that's where it's, you know, from your perspective, that just speaks to you, even your character further, where 8 times out of 10, you still want to help and support, even though these people can literally be doing, in the big picture of things, really nothing to kind of give back to the sport, putting on a, you know, a bare minimum thrown together kind of meet. But that's just the world of powerlifting. And that's where it's just what everyone says through everything that's happening with the federation. Support the meet directors, not the federation. You know, go give your business, because as a competitor, you are the consumer and you are giving your business to a meet director. Go give it places where you can see it's the right experience, where the money is going back in certain areas, and even the money that's going to the meet director is going to a good person, you know. But it's difficult. There's so much out there. It's so congested and saturated.
Yeah.
Last thing I kind of wanted to talk about from a business perspective as well, because it's something that I know, me personally, over the last, you know, couple years, where I've come from a position of running companies, but they weren't my own companies, to now them being my own companies, having multiple companies, and also having a family. You talked about all those years of being in the trenches, balancing all of that. How do you balance the running of these businesses with your family? You have 4 beautiful baby boys. Is that it?
Yeah. Yeah. 4 of them. So I don't think there is a man, this is a tough question, and I've answered it several different ways over the years that I've gotten them. When I was first started, when I was in the trenches for more hours than I even care to admit, my wife was pregnant. My wife was going through her master's program while I was spending the night at work away from her, even when the twins were born. So they were born in 13. No, they were born in 417. Edit this out. When was their birth? They're 9. They're 14. 417, 14. So they were born in 14. I was still spending, sometimes 18, 20 hours a day in the shop.
There was no balance at that point because it was the sacrifice, right? Is that initial
Right. So
sacrifice?
yeah, yeah, and we wouldn't have the things that we have. We wouldn't be afforded the opportunity that we have without going full tilt in the business. I knew that was our best route for financial success and somewhat freedom. So I was all in over there, and when the twins, if the twins were ever sick, or if one of the other kids, there was always ebb and flows, right? So like I'd be full tilt over here, or if my family needed me, I'd be full tilt over here. There was no 50-50 going back and forth. Like, I don't think there is a balance. You're all in where you're at. And then you come home and you got to be all in over here. It's easy for me to say, it's not that easy to do. There are times where my kids are talking to me and I'm trying to do a DM on Instagram, and it's not the right way to be. As a father, as a man, it's not the right way to be. But as a business owner, it is the right way to be. So it's hard. There's no doubt. And I could sit here and preach to you and be like, yes, you need to be all in over here and all in over here. And there is no overlap. And it would be BS, because there is a bunch of overlap. I have conversations with my children to tell them, like, look, daddy's working right now. Let me finish what I'm doing. And then we can, throw the baseball, or we can talk, or whatever the case is. So there is not really a balance. I think it really is. You have to try and be all in wherever you're at in your headspace. If you're at home, be at home. If you're at work, be at work.
And
I think that's probably the best.
I think you absolutely nailed that. And it's also something that a lot of people don't understand. With what you're saying is there is a balance, but there's not at the same time. Yeah. And I tell people this all the time. I haven't taken a true vacation or an actual disconnect since my honeymoon in 2019. And it was completely accidental. I had gotten a Wi-Fi hotspot to still be able to work everywhere I was. And then I'm in the middle of Botswana and I find out Botswana is the one place the hotspot doesn't work. And I'm in panic mode. And I had 72 hours with no reception to speak to clients, answer emails, anything. But besides that, you can find over time the proper amount, because I feel if you are to have a successful business, you have to, like you said, be all in 100% and be willing to always be on call to an extent, but it doesn't always have to feel like work. It just kind of feels like routine, right? It kind of just feels like you're doing part of your everyday, and you can still do part of that your everyday while still having your family and everything else. It becomes kind of a sense of normalcy. And I think that also separates where it's like you're truly doing something that you love and that you're passionate about, that you're willing to, and you're okay with that. This is your everyday, no matter what. And you can still also have both sides of it, right?
Yeah, right.
And I think you have to fully understand that. It's like you have to experience that and be doing that and be able to do that to understand it. And I think it's a very important thing of business, and a very important something that not everyone can do, will be willing to do. And if they don't do it, that's where things kind of start falling between the cracks. I think you're like me also, where you're very micromanager. You have to be involved and hands-on, even though you have these kind of processes and you have this team that you trust, you still want to be involved in it 100%.
I do, and I really do try to let my people do their jobs, because they do their jobs well. So I do try to stand back and always just be in the shadows in case somebody, needs to raise their hand and ask for help. That's kind of where I stand. Like if I get involved in the business, it's because there's an issue of some sort. There's, somebody has asked for help, whether they, are short staffed, or, they've got a question, a customer that's not being answered appropriately, or whatever the case is. Like I always want to be there in case somebody needs me.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I run now.
Well, and it's also, it's your baby and you still treat it as such. There's many people, CEOs, people who start a company, who will delegate everything to the point where they don't even need to look at anything, and there's still plenty of companies that are successful like that. They don't need to speak to anyone. They don't need to do anything, but you're still, like you said, answering the DMs, doing, customer service, talking to people, doing these Q&As, and you're not willing to let go of that. And I think that's also part of what keeps the brand so true and gives that integrity. That's where it's like Tim, my ex-business partner, he had a huge struggle because he wasn't willing to let that go, but because he had so many other things going on, he couldn't handle that as well. He couldn't handle all this communication, all this heart and soul in that side of things, when he had a huge company they had to run on the other aspect of things. And I respect that, because I even told him, I was like, look, let other people handle that. Let other people do this, that, and the other. And he's like, it just wouldn't be the same, right? It wouldn't be that same level of love and passion that you can pour into your own baby.
It's true. It's true.
Man. So honestly, all the questions that I had from Q&As, we talked about them. We covered all of them. So what's next? What's the future of Pioneer? Any other cool things coming up down the line you want to talk about?
I mean, the only thing that we've got the new sleeves that are out that everybody seems to really enjoy. That was something that I've been trying to bring to market for a long, long time. Like literally 7 years. I've been looking for. We scoured American manufacturers and neoprenes, and it's just American manufacturing, and the neoprene side of sleeves is just. I found it to be pretty well impossible to do. So the knee sleeves is something I'm excited about to see how well. They've been, the initial release was well received, but continuing that, and then also our patent for the PAL, that's probably coming up in the next few months. That I've kind of sitting on pins and needles, trying to figure that part out. And once that's out, then we look into licensing agreements and kind of doing all that kind of stuff, like we did with the Pioneer cut. Outside of that, we're going to keep doing a lot of the same, right? I mean, customer service, custom belts, and giving back is kind of who we are. That's what we're known for. That's what we'll continue to do.
I love it, man. If you guys don't already know, like I said, Matt has supported the Ghost Clash the 2 previous years. before that Hybrid Showdown. He always was there, always supporting it. They are a title sponsor again for this next year's The Ghost Clash. We already have over $30,000 raised for the prize pool. We have more announcements coming up soon about the Ghost Clash. So if you guys are listening to this, you're involved in the Ghost Clash. You'll be hearing more announcements on the social media page. If you want to get involved as a sponsor for the Ghost Clash, just doing a quick plug, send out an email, reach out to us. We want to just keep growing that prize pool to give back to the athletes 100%. Matt, thank you so much for jumping on. It was cool to hear, more of the Pioneer story. It's always a good time chatting with you. Let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
And thanks again for letting me on here. Social media is at Pioneer_fit. Pretty much all platforms. Website is our parent company, GeneralLeathercraft.com.
Hell yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode of the WRPF podcast. Thank you for tuning in.